The air in the subterranean auction house was thick with the stench of cheap cologne, desperation, and old blood. Elias Thorne, alpha of the formidable Shadowpeak pack, leaned against a velvet-draped pillar, his dark eyes radiating pure boredom. Tonight's farce was not his choice. The elders, citing archaic laws and the pressing need for stability, had decreed he must take a lunar. Elias saw it as a weakness, a chain around his neck. So he had decided to make a mockery of the process. The auctioneer, a greasy man named Silas, was midway through selling a trembling delta. A fine pedigree, excellent childbearer, starting at 5,000. Elias didn't even listen. He was waiting for the final, most pathetic lot. He wanted the worst one. The one no one would touch. The one that would send a clear, disdainful message to his busybody elders. This is what I think of your traditions. Finally, Silas cleared his throat with a theatrical flourish. And now our final offering. A rarity. Omega non-shifter, no scent, deeply scarred. A bargain for anyone needing a simple servant or a punching bag. Silas's voice dripped with contempt as a girl was shoved onto the small stage. She was indeed a wreck. Her limbs were too thin, trembling visibly, and her dull grey tunic hung loose. What Silas had called deeply scarred was an understatement. A jagged, faded burn mark twisted across her left cheek, pulling down the corner of her eye and lending her a perpetually sad expression. Her scent gland, usually the proudest display of an Omega's identity, was completely blank. A dead zone. She kept her head bowed, staring at her bare feet, an aura of profound brokenness radiating from her. Her only distinguishing feature was a chaotic mass of hair the colour of midnight. A ripple of scornful laughter went through the room. No one would bid on this trash. Starting bid, Silas spat. $1. Silence. Then a cold, powerful voice cut through the air. Sold! All heads snapped towards Elias. He hadn't even raised his hand. He simply met the auctioneer's astonished gaze. $1. I claim the Omega. The room erupted in whispers. The Shadowpeak Alpha. Why, is it a joke? Elias strode forward, his massive frame intimidating every lesser wolf in the room. He tossed a single, crisp dollar bill onto the stage, where it fluttered to the Omega's feet. He didn't look at her, only at Silas. Prepare the papers. She leaves with me now. He had bought her. The ugly Omega bride. The dollar bride. He had no idea he had just purchased the most powerful and most dangerous woman in the entire Lycan world. This simple, broken girl was the lost Luna, and the universe had just tipped onto its axis. Elias's future as the ruthless, solitary alpha was about to come crashing down. He had just exchanged a single dollar for a destiny he couldn't control. The weight of his pack and the balance of power now rested on the fragile shoulders of the scarred girl he hadn't even truly looked at. He only saw a tool for defiance, not the key to his own transformation. The sheer audacity of his move, the nonchalance of his demeanour, cemented his reputation as the alpha who feared nothing, not even the scorn of tradition. He needed to get her back to his territory, file the papers, and get this whole sorry mess over with. The ride back to Shadowpeak territory was conducted in absolute silence. Lyra, for that was her name, though no one had asked it in years, sat huddled in the corner of Elias's opulent, black-armoured SUV. The smooth leather seat felt alien beneath her, a stark contrast to the straw and cold floor she was accustomed to. She didn't dare look at the alpha. He was a mountain of a man, emitting a constant, terrifying pressure that made her Omega instincts scream for submission and flight simultaneously. The dollar bride. That's what the auctioneer had called her. Lyra knew her worth was less than nothing, yet this powerful alpha had paid a pittance for her. It made her stomach clench with fear. High-status alphas didn't buy damaged goods for servitude. They bought them for other things. Brutal things. She braced herself for the inevitable pain, rehearsing the mental walls she would erect to survive. They reached Shadowpeak, a fortress carved into the side of a granite mountain. It wasn't just a home. It was a symbol of Elias's iron-fisted rule. Lyra was led through silent, pristine halls by a beta named Marcus, whose gaze was strangely devoid of the usual disgust. "You'll be in the East Wing, Omega," Marcus said, his voice clipped but not unkind. "Alpha Thorne has decreed a full medical review. You are to be fed and clothed. No one is to touch you without his explicit command. Understand?
Yes, sir,
Lyra managed, her voice a rusty whisper. The room she was taken to was vast, featuring a king-sized bed, soft carpets, and a window overlooking a terrifyingly beautiful, jagged landscape. This was not a cage. It was a prison disguised as a sanctuary. Later that evening, the Alpha himself appeared. Lyra was sitting rigidly on the edge of the bed, freshly bathed and dressed in soft, oversized cotton. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. Elias stood in the doorway, his eyes colder than the mountain peaks outside. He didn't enter fully, maintaining a distance that was both unnerving and relieving. Lyra, he stated, the name sounding foreign and authoritative on his tongue. You are here as my Luna in name only. You will not embarrass me. You will speak only when spoken to. You will wear what I tell you to wear, and you will stay confined to this wing unless given escort. I have no need for a mate, and I certainly have no patience for weakness. He paused, his gaze briefly flicking to the scar on her cheek, a flicker of something unreadable in his depths. You are a symbol. A shield, nothing more. Do you understand your place? Lyra pushed back the urge to weep. She stood up, forcing her spine straight. I understand, Alpha Thorn. I will not be a source of shame for your pack. I will be silent, and I will be gone when you deem it necessary. She spoke with a quiet dignity she didn't know she possessed. Her answer wasn't subservient, but pragmatic. Elias's dark brows furrowed, a trace of surprise crossing his face. He'd expected whimpers, hysterics, or attempts at seduction, the usual Omega responses. Not this quiet resolve. He had purchased a broken body, but the spirit, though battered, was still faintly burning. He gave a curt nod. Good, now you will eat. Marcus will bring your meals. Do not test my patience, Lyra. The cost was minimal, and the loss of the investment would mean nothing to me. With that chilling declaration, he turned and left, leaving Lyra alone in the massive room, her supposed sanctuary where a strange, unfamiliar energy, a low, humming warmth she hadn't felt since childhood, began to pulse beneath her skin. She instinctively clutched her head, trying to suppress the sudden, overwhelming sensation, unknowingly fighting the awakening of the Luna's essence. She was shaking not just from fear, but from the raw, unfamiliar power starting to bleed through the magical suppressants that had bound her for years. The sheer size of her new surroundings, the unexpected comfort, was somehow more unsettling than a dungeon. She was a pawn in a game she didn't know how to play, purchased for $1, now residing in the heart of the most powerful and ruthless pack in the territory. Weeks bled into a quiet, tense month within the east wing of Shadow Peak. Lyra settled into a routine that was less grueling than the forced labour of the auction house, but far more isolating. She spent her days reading the few dusty books Marcus brought her, observing the mountain wildlife from her window, and diligently eating every meal placed before her. The full medical review had been cursory, noting only her malnutrition, the severity of the scar tissue, and the complete lack of a discernible wolf scent or shift ability, concluding she was indeed a non-shifter Omega. Exactly as advertised. However, things were changing inside Lyra. Slowly, subtly. The oppressive sense of brokenness that had clung to her for years began to lift. The food, the rest, and most importantly, the removal from the constant fear of abuse, allowed a strange energy to bloom. The dullness in her scent gland was giving way to an almost undetectable, faint scent of nothing. It was a neutral, clean aroma, but it was there. A change from the total void. Her scar, too, was behaving strangely. It was no longer a harsh, angry red. It was fading to a pearly white, the skin around it softening. It still pulled her eye, but the constant, agonizing phantom burn had subsided. Lyra attributed it to improved nutrition and proper sleep. She didn't dare dream of a cure. Scars were permanent, but the most potent change was the dreams. They were vivid, terrifying flashes of memory. A massive silver wolf, a gentle woman's laugh, the blinding flash of magic, and the sound of a name. Luna. She'd wake up in a cold sweat, her hands tingling with a sharp electric sensation. One afternoon, a pack healer, an elderly woman named Alara, was brought in by Marcus to check on a stubborn cough Lyra had developed. Alara was the only one who didn't look at Lyra with pity or scorn. She was all business, her wrinkled hands surprisingly warm. As Alara placed her hand on Lyra's forehead, she frowned. Her eyes widened minutely. Your fever is low, child, but your internal energy... Alara trailed off, pulling her hand back quickly. She looked at Lyra with sudden intensity. Tell me, Omega, has anything changed? Do you feel any different? Lyra froze. She didn't want to draw attention to herself. Only that I feel stronger, healer. The cough is a nuisance, nothing more. Alara studied her face, her eyes lingering on the fading scar. Yes, stronger, she murmured, more to herself than to Lyra. There's a wellspring here. Suppressed, but... oh my... The magic is fighting its way out. Before Lyra could ask what she meant, the door swung open and Elias entered. Is the Omega well, Alara? I have no time for sick house staff, he commanded, his voice impatient. Alara straightened, her composure instantly returning. She was an elder, and though she respected Elias, she was not cowed. She is well, Alpha Thorn. Malnutrition corrected. The scar tissue is fading naturally, which is rare, but she has a sturdy constitution. She just needs rest and continued care. Nothing to concern the Alpha. She shot Lyra a quick, meaningful glance. Elias simply grunted. Good. Marcus, ensure the Omega's regimen is maintained. I expect no complications. He dismissed them both with a wave of his hand. After Alara left, Lyra walked to the mirror. The scar was indeed lighter, but it wasn't just the scar. Her eyes, which had been dull, lifeless brown, now had a tiny, almost imperceptible silver ring around the pupil, visible only in the bright light of the day. And the neutral scent was now undeniably a faint, clean musk, laced with the scent of rain on pine. It was an Omega scent, yes, but one that smelled not of submission, but of pristine resilience. Lyra had been purchased for $1 as an act of defiance, but in the heart of the Shadow Peak pack, the lost Luna was slowly, irrevocably beginning to remember who she was. The suppressants that had been injected into her as a child, meant to keep her true identity hidden, were finally breaking under the sheer force of her innate, powerful lunar magic. Elias Thorn was a creature of routine and control, yet since the arrival of the Dollar Bride, his routine had been subtly disrupted. He found himself asking Marcus about Lyra's well-being with increasing frequency. It wasn't concern, he told himself. It was damage control. A sick Luna, even a nominal one, would be a political headache. The pack, meanwhile, was starting to notice. The beta women, who had initially sneered at the ugly servant, were now confused. Lyra was no longer hunched. Her eyes met theirs with a quiet, unflinching dignity. The fading of her scar was undeniable, leaving her with a delicate, almost otherworldly beauty that had been brutally masked. Her massive midnight black hair, now washed and cared for, cascaded down her back like a dark river. Most confusingly, the neutral scent had morphed into something captivating, a clean, elemental fragrance that didn't scream Omega but rather whispered untouchable. The male wolves, especially the younger ones, were restless. They could sense a change, a new presence that didn't fit the meek Omega profile. Their instincts, trained to seek out power and beauty, were beginning to hum. They looked at Lyra and saw not a slave but a mystery. One afternoon, while Lyra was allowed a supervised walk in a secluded courtyard, a concession Elias had reluctantly made for her health, she encountered Torvin, a mid-ranking but aggressively ambitious alpha. Torvin stepped into her path, his scent sharp with dominance and challenge. He had heard the whispers of her transformation, and came to test the limits of the Dollar Bride. Well, well. The alpha's joke, Torvin sneered, his eyes raking over her. You've cleaned up, Omega, almost appealing. You seem too pretty for $1 now. Perhaps you should try to earn your keep properly. My den needs a good warming. Lyra felt a familiar knot of terror, but this time it was swiftly followed by a surge of pure, cold rage. She did not back away. She didn't drop her gaze. I am Luna of Shadow Peak, Lyra said, her voice surprisingly steady and low, but carrying a terrifying nascent authority that startled Torvin. And you are addressing me without permission. I suggest you remember your place before you find yourself without a rank. The sheer audacity of the threat from a non-shifting Omega made Torvin bark with laughter. He took a step closer, crowding her space, his wolf almost surfacing. You command me, little dollar whore? Your alpha bought you as a joke. You have no rank. As his hand shot out to grab her arm, the power Lyra had been suppressing finally roared out, not as a shift, but as pure, uncontrolled magic. A shockwave of brilliant, cold silver energy erupted from her core. It wasn't violent, but it was absolute. Torvin was instantly flung backward, slamming into the stone wall with a pained grunt. He felt a moment of blinding, primal submission, a feeling reserved for the true Luna of all packs. He stared at her, his eyes wide with a confusion that bordered on panic. The scar seemed to pulse with a faint light, and the silver ring in her eyes was now undeniably prominent. The noise of the impact drew Elias. He arrived, a thunderous shadow, his alpha scent exploding in the courtyard. He took in the scene, the Omega standing perfectly still, her aura radiating a strange power, and Torvin slumped on the ground, shaking with a terror that no beta could inflict. "Torvin!" Elias's voice was a low growl of pure fury. "Report!" Torvin scrambled to his feet, bowing low, his voice trembling. "Alpha, she attacked me. I only wanted to check on her well-being." Elias turned his burning gaze on Lyra. "Lyra, explain." Lyra looked at her Alpha, the terror of his presence warring with the intoxicating buzz of her new power. She was no longer just a broken girl. "Alpha Thorn," she said, her voice clear. "The Beta Torvin attempted to violate my personal space and spoke disrespectfully. I merely defended my boundaries. I reacted instinctively to his aggression. She didn't lie. She simply omitted the part about the blinding silver blast of energy. Elias, whose senses were legendary, could smell the lingering scent of both dominance and raw, untamed magic in the air. He smelled a power that should not belong to an Omega. He looked at Lyra, seeing not a joke, but a potential nuclear reactor he'd bought for $1. The cost of his foolish rebellion was suddenly becoming very, very high. His mind raced. He had to decide whether to punish her for a supposed attack, or to protect her from the political fallout of having a mysterious, powerful female in his pack. He chose the latter. His pack. He chose the latter. Elias dismissed Torvin with a swift, brutal punishment, 2 weeks of solitary confinement and menial labour, not for attacking the Luna, but for challenging Elias's property. The subtle distinction was lost on no one. Lyra was under the Shadow Peak Alpha's protection, no matter how reluctantly given. Elias, however, was deeply unsettled. The faint metallic tang of raw magic in the courtyard was undeniable, and Torvin's submission was too complete to be a lie. Lyra was no ordinary Omega. He locked himself in his study and began a frantic, discreet investigation. He pulled records from the black market, going back 20 years. He tracked the transport logs and the original sellers. The trail led him to a forgotten small-time poaching group that had been wiped out shortly after Lyra's sale. The only remaining link was a grainy, fragmented photo of the girl, listed simply as Lot 47 Rare Non-Shifter, Omega grade. Then he widened his net, pulling favours and using his connections to cross-reference known missing persons. He focused on disappearances with high-profile magical suppression, particularly those involving children from powerful bloodlines. The search was painstaking, leading down one dead end after another, until one night, a single coded file landed on his desk. The file detailed the 20-year-old kidnapping of Lyra Selene, the only daughter of the Alpha and Luna of the Moonlit River Pack, one of the oldest and most magically potent packs in the world. The official report stated her body was never found, presumed dead in a magically unstable attack, orchestrated by a rival pack. The photo attached to the file was an artist's rendition of what the young Luna might have looked like, a child with the same midnight hair and delicate bone structure as the girl in his East Wing. But the key detail was a medical note from the initial police report. Subject possessed a unique, intense silver aura, believed to be the source of a powerful, rare brand of elemental lunar magic. Possible magical suppression or binding attempts may be attempted by kidnappers to mask identity. Elias stared at the file, the blood draining from his face. Luna. The word echoed in the quiet room. He hadn't bought a broken Omega bride. He had bought the long-lost daughter of a rival, powerful Alpha, a Luna. And not just any Luna, but one with intense silver aura and elemental magic. He had bought a ticking time bomb for $1. His initial defiance, his petty joke against the Elders, had put the Shadow Peak pack directly in the crosshairs of a potential war. not just with the Moonlit River Pack when they found out, but potentially with the entire Lycan Council. Kidnapping a Luna was an act of war. Purchasing one, even unknowingly, was political suicide. He looked at the small accompanying photo. On the child's cheek, just beneath the eye, was a tiny birthmark, a faint crescent moon shape. Elias knew instantly. Underneath the scar tissue of his dollar bride, Lyra, was that exact mark. The magic had been so intensely suppressed that her wolf and her scent had been bound, causing the physical scarring as a side effect. But her wolf was fighting back, and the suppressants were failing. Elias walked over to his window, looking out over his vast territory. His pack, he had to protect them. He had two choices: return her and face the political humiliation and possibly a trial, or keep her and pretend he knew nothing, banking on his own strength to protect the true Luna of another pack, now inexplicably tied to him by a sham marriage. He was an alpha of iron will. He had never run from a fight, and he certainly wouldn't now. He would keep her, not as his joke Luna, but as a silent, powerful secret weapon. The problem was she was not a weapon. She was a woman, and a Luna, and her growing power was making his own alpha instincts he thought were dead, stir with a deep proprietary need. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare display of stress. His dollar purchase was about to change his life and his pack's future forever. He needed to get the Omega, the lost Luna, out of the East Wing and under his immediate personal supervision before anyone else discovered the truth. He had to make a move. He had to claim her, not as an act of mockery but of necessity. The next morning, Elias had Lyra summoned to his private office. This was unprecedented. She had never been allowed into the Alpha's inner sanctum. Lyra entered the room, her heart pounding but her head held high. She could sense the shift in his demeanour. It wasn't the cold indifference she was used to. It was a potent mix of intense focus, barely concealed tension, and something that felt suspiciously like a flicker of awe. Her own nascent power, the silver energy, hummed in response to his sheer alpha presence. Elias sat behind his heavy oak desk, his hands clasped, a statue of severe authority. He didn't look up immediately. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken truths. Finally he spoke, his voice low and gravelly. "Torvin has been dealt with. It will not happen again. I have instituted a new policy. No one, under any circumstances, is to approach you without my explicit permission. This is for your protection, Lyra, and for the Pack's." Lyra frowned, confused by the level of security. "Thank you, Alpha. I understand." He finally looked up, and his gaze was like a physical blow, intense, searching and knowing. "Do you, Lyra?" he challenged. "Do you truly understand what you are?" She flinched. The words felt like an accusation, a prelude to exposure. "I am an Omega Alpha, purchased for $1. I understand my place is to be a silent figurehead." Elias leaned back, a dark, dangerous smile touching the corners of his mouth. "The Omegas I know do not possess the power to throw Alphas across a room without touching them. The Omegas I know do not have a scent that smells like a nascent storm or eyes that glitter with silver." He pushed the file from his investigation across the desk. The file detailing the Moonlit River Luna. "I know the truth, Lyra Selene. You are not a dollar bride. You are the lost Luna of the Moonlit River Pack, kidnapped 20 years ago, magically suppressed. Your scar is not an injury. It's the physical manifestation of a powerful binding spell that is now failing. I know who you are." Lyra stumbled back a step, her control shattering. Her face went white and her breath hitched. The secret she had carried, the fragmented memories she couldn't piece together, had been laid bare. The name Selena, Moon, rang in her ears with painful familiarity. Her hands began to glow with a faint silvery light. "No, I'm not. I'm just Lyra, I'm just a slave." She denied it weakly, fear overwhelming her. She couldn't be the Luna, that life was a dream, a fairy tale, not the truth of her broken existence. "Look at your hands," Elias commanded, his voice firm but not angry. "That is Luna's magic. That is your birthright." He stood up, walking around the desk. His height and power were overwhelming, yet he stopped a respectful distance away, an acknowledgement of her unexpected status. "I am not going to turn you in, Lyra. I purchased you. You are legally bound to me. And in this pack, my word is law. You will remain here. Your safety is paramount, but you will no longer hide. You will learn to control that power. You will assume the role of Luna, not my joke Luna, but a hidden, powerful force. And I will protect you from the wolves who put you in that auction house, and the ones who want to finish the job. His eyes met hers, and for the first time, Lyra saw past the ruthlessness to the profound, protective alpha deep beneath. His declaration was not a request, it was a commitment. The dollar bride had been replaced by the lost Luna, and the alpha who had sworn off all connection was now inextricably linked to a destiny far greater than his own. His heart, long dormant, was beginning to beat a heavy, insistent rhythm, claiming the woman before him as his own. The woman before him as his own. The dynamic between Elias and Lyra transformed overnight. The cold, distant alpha was replaced by a demanding yet fiercely protective tutor. Elias began training Lyra himself in the privacy of an unused underground chamber. The goal was simple: to stabilize the rapidly re-emerging lunar magic before it became uncontrollable and blew her cover, and his pack's secrecy, wide open. Again, Lyra, focus on your core, Elias commanded, watching her intently. Lyra stood in the center of the room, panting. Her body ached. The suppression was fighting the lunar magic, causing her constant low-grade pain. But she was determined. She was no longer fighting for survival. She was fighting for identity. The magic is elemental, Lyra. It is not yours to command, but of you. It is the moon's will channeled through your bloodline, Elias instructed. When you feel the surge, do not fear it, shape it. Push the power out, but contain the light. Lyra closed her eyes, dredging up the feelings she hated, the cold, the fear, the isolation. She channeled the emotional pain into a single point of silver-white energy, pushing it through her hands. This time, instead of an uncontrollable burst, a beautiful, swirling column of silver light erupted, washing over the chamber. The effect was immediate. The rough stone walls glowed faintly, and the air felt clean, potent, and alive. Elias stared, transfixed. Her power was magnificent, exceeding anything the old records had described. When she opened her eyes, the silver rings around her pupils were now solid, bright bands. Her scar was nearly gone, leaving only the faintest pearly-white trace of the crescent moon birthmark, a mark of her true, royal, moonlit river lineage. She was breathtaking. The tension in the chamber was no longer just about magic. It was a potent sexual force. Elias had initially felt only a desperate need to protect his secret. Now his alpha wolf recognized her power, her beauty, and her resilience. She was his true mate, purchased for $1, delivered by fate. Every session was torture for him. He had to maintain distance while his wolf screamed to claim her, to complete the bond, to fully awaken her wolf and Luna. One evening, after a particularly exhausting session, Lyra stumbled. Elias caught her, his large, rough hands closing around her small waist. The contact was electric. Lyra gasped, and the dormant lunar wolf finally, irrevocably awoke inside her. It was not a physical shift, but an internal combustion of pure primal identity. Her faint scent exploded into a potent perfume of pine and rain, laced with an undeniable, intoxicating sweetness that proclaimed her as the alpha's mate. Elias froze, his control fracturing. The new scent hit him like a physical wave, triggering his full alpha response. His eyes went golden, and a low, guttural growl ripped from his chest. "Mine," he whispered, his voice dark with possession. "You are mine." He pulled her against his chest, crushing her to him. The long, frustrating weeks of denial dissolved. He buried his face in her hair, inhaling her perfect, intoxicating scent. Lyra didn't pull away. She leaned into him, her lunar wolf recognizing her alpha, her home. The fear was gone, replaced by a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. "I know," she murmured, her arms tentatively wrapping around his waist. "I am yours, Elias, my alpha." The silence that followed was broken only by their synchronized heartbeats. He had bought a broken slave to spite his elders. He had purchased a Luna. But in that moment, in the cold training room, he had found his mate, and she had found her salvation. The Wanta bride was gone. The lost Luna was claimed. The price had been $1, but the value was now the fate of 2 packs. The physical claim was the spark. The political turmoil was the fire. The next day, Lyra walked out of the East Wing and into the main halls of Shadow Peak. She wore a dress of rich, dark velvet, Elias's choice. She carried herself with an unmistakable, quiet regality. Her scar was a pale, almost invisible crescent, a subtle beauty mark that enhanced her ethereal looks. Her scent, now fully developed, was a sweet declaration of her status. The pack recognized the change instantly. The joke was over. Elias Thorne had claimed a powerful Luna, and the whole pack fell silent in her presence, bowing low. The inevitable happened 1 week later. The Moonlit River Pack, led by Lyra's true alpha father, Alistair Selene, arrived at the Shadow Peak border with a delegation demanding an audience. They had received an anonymous tip, likely from a disgruntled Torvin, detailing the sudden rise of a powerful new, silver-scented Luna in Shadow Peak, a woman fitting the description of their lost daughter. The meeting was held in Elias's Grand Council room. Elias stood, a monolithic presence, with Lyra, calm, collected and powerful, at his side. Alistair Selene, a grizzled alpha with eyes of silver, stared across the room. He saw Lyra and his breath hitched. The crescent mark, the midnight hair, the palpable, elemental lunar power, there was no doubt. "My daughter," Alistair whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "Alpha Selene," Elias began, his voice hard. "She is safe." "And she is mine," Alistair roared, his alpha wolf surging. "You bought her at an auction. You paid $1! You think that makes you worthy of the lost Luna?" Elias was unflinching. "I paid $1 for a broken, scarred slave whose own family had given her up for dead. I did not traffic her. I redeemed her. I protected her from the wolves who bound her magic. I healed her, and I was the one whose alpha instinct recognized the truth and fought to bring her power to light." He gripped Lyra's hand, and the room was flooded with the combined sense of their potent bond. "She is legally my Luna, and she is my true mate. Her wolf Lyra has chosen me." All eyes turned to Lyra. The fate of the two packs rested on her word. Lyra stepped forward, her silver eyes meeting her father's. "Father," she said, the word feeling both new and right. "I remember a loving family. I remember the pain of loss. But I remember 20 years of darkness. Elias did not cause the darkness, but he rescued me from it. He respected me when I was a slave. He trusted me when my power emerged. He is the alpha who brought the Luna back to life. My wolf is bound to his. I am the lost Luna, but I am the Shadow Peak Luna. I choose Elias Thorne." Alistair looked at his long-lost daughter, seeing not a pawn, but a sovereign. Her choice was absolute. He deflated, the alpha rage draining away, replaced by a deep, weary acceptance. "Then you must pay a final price, Alpha Thorne," he said, his voice raw. "The price of 20 years of suffering. The price of redemption. The price of my daughter's hand." Elias simply nodded. "Name it. I will pay it." The negotiations were brutal, involving land, resources, and a formal signed treaty of alliance between the two powerful packs. The single dollar that Elias had paid was forgotten, replaced by a debt of honour, love, and political necessity. Elias Thorne, the ruthless alpha who had scorned all customs, had his true Luna, found in the most unlikely and foolish of ways. He had paid $1 for the ugly Omega, and in return he had earned the most powerful mate in the Lycan world, and forged a peace that would define his legacy. The dollar was the joke. The bond was the destiny. The bond was the destiny.